I think it's quite rare to have kind of deal-breaking technical issues. And that's also coming from someone who was a technical lead for a couple of years. So it sounds like I'm doing myself out of a job, but actually you can kind of get by in terms of you don't need to have perfect technical SEO.
On today's episode, I'm joined by Seb Atkinson. He's currently the director of Atkinson Smith Digital. He previously held the role as Technical SEO Lead for NerdWallet. He's also quite active in being an SEO influencer where he shares his learnings with the world. Enjoy today's episode. So let's start with a bit of your background. From what I saw, you had a social media past, you were in digital marketing, and then you ended up doing work in an agency and then in-house, and now you're consulting through your own practice firm
That's
company.
right.
What did you learn in your in-house days that sort of changed the way that you advise your current clients currently?
Yeah, that was actually really a useful experience for me. You know, stepping outside of agency life. I think I was there for agency side 6 to 7 years across 2 different agencies. And, you know, actually knowing what is it like working in-house, having agencies report to you. I learned a lot about, what's the value for an agency. How did they deliver value by being on the other side? So that was really helpful when, I've wanted to run my own consultancy for some time. I didn't really have the right means to do that at the time, but it felt like the right time to do it. So that was good. You know, dealing with relationships with external partners from the other side, but also just learning about what are the in-house challenges, what are people in-house up against, what do they need to do to make things come to fruition. I think one mistake I probably made earlier in my career when I was agency side was kind of thinking of a client as this kind of monolith where they just, they're all aligned, they will get the resources in place to do things. But obviously, the reality is there's a lot more politics, there's different stakeholders with different objectives. And yeah, that was probably the biggest thing I learned from that. So that was really valuable and just, generally interesting in terms of how do businesses operate.
A lot more people skills and people management involved as well, not just...
Yeah. And I think actually as well, it's about how you deliver it as an external partner. I don't know. I found you can be a bit more open and honest. I think people can talk about those things, but obviously when you're in-house, you've got stakeholders working on different things. The way you deliver something has to be right. It has to bring them on board. So that was an important skill. Something I make sure I factor in with, even being external now. So very important.
So you're so polite. You're strategic. You're
I think,
honest.
I don't know. I think people think I'm polite. I don't know if I actually am. I hope I am.
So when you actually start with a new client in your current consulting, what are the 3 things that you look for when you decide whether the biggest issue or the biggest win, for your client is technical, content, or even setting up their metrics, their measurements, their dashboards?
Yeah.
How do you kind of deliberate that?
Definitely. I think it really starts in that first meeting and asking, what are your goals? That leads to how are you measuring it? So that answers that first part. Have they got some tracking problems? Sometimes I'll speak to people where they're saying like they don't actually know, what has the website generated. This has actually happened for a client for me quite recently. They didn't know. And it's because they didn't have the right reporting in place. They weren't looking at the reporting. They didn't have the reporting data. They had it in Google Analytics, but it wasn't being presented to them. They didn't know, didn't understand it. So, that's something that you can kind of quickly understand. And then the other 2 aspects, content and technical, the 2 areas that I mostly focus on. To be honest, most of my clients need more work with content. And I think that's the case for most people. I think it's quite rare to have kind of deal-breaking technical issues. And that's also coming from someone who was a technical lead for a couple of years. So it sounds like I'm doing myself out of a job, but actually you can kind of get by in terms of you don't need to have perfect technical SEO. It's important. You need to monitor it. You need to make sure your pages are visible. And sometimes the technical issues, they are the root cause for pages not appearing properly. But actually, most companies, most websites probably don't need to spend that much effort on it. It's something they need to be aware of and they probably should do alongside content. But most of the time, I just find actually just having the right content for the queries. I think one of the biggest traps I've seen recently is just people focusing on output they think publishing X amount of pages per month will move the needle, but actually, are they updating the content that they've already got? Is it delivering a good user experience? Is it up to date with what their customers are actually looking for? And I find sometimes that in-house teams, when they've got lots to do, they're maybe not prioritizing that. So that's where I kind of start content, make sure there's no urgent technical problems, but then I'll usually find actually there are some tweaks we can do, but let's get a content program underway first.
Nice. So that is basically your priority. And I wanted to know, has your content strategy changed a lot in the last year? How are you approaching,
Yeah.
what is your LLM-proof content strategy for your clients?
Well, to be honest, it's more how I deliver the content is slightly different with LLMs. So what I mean by that is, it takes a lot of time to write a good piece of content. That's important. It has to be unique. I suppose one change I have made, an important one actually, in terms of maybe what I was doing 6 years ago is, before I'd probably be focusing on those metrics I just mentioned, okay, we need to build out X number of pages, and the table stakes were probably a bit lower in terms of if you have a page on a topic, you're probably going to rank for it. Everyone else has got pages now, so your page needs to be better quality. So how do we bring that in? And this moves on to that process piece. So I use tools like Also Ask to understand the the different things that people need behind these topics and feed that into my content process. Obviously, you have the previous episode where Mark spoke about that in a lot more detail, but that's something I build into my approach. And then I use LLMs to help me with that drafting phase. So, pulling in questions, I'll vet them first to make sure they're super relevant to, the actual topic we're talking about. Sometimes you can get other topics mixed in and you just need to make sure they're clear. And then that kind of gives me like a first draft. I can also pull in, competitor pages. I scrape them for their, header titles, title tags. And then I get an idea of the different things they're covering. And then I can get a decent first draft. And then that's where I can bring in an expert from in-house. So I think that era of, companies outsourcing all of their content to an agency who maybe sits apart from the business and maybe doesn't have the in-house knowledge, I think that's kind of over. And I think, it's actually, you have to be knowledgeable. So that's an important thing to bring in.
And also having that tone of voice, right? And that strong tone of voice for the company, I think at least that's what I've been reading seems to be more important going into 2026 to sort of differentiate your brand from the rest. So I see a lot of companies actually investing more in senior content writing talents. So you then work together with them. So you provide them with sort of the technical skills,
So
and then they sort of add their flair and tone of voice. Or how's the process like?
Yeah, so I've got an article on my website around that, building out the overall content strategy. It's probably more geared around companies who maybe don't have a library of content that's aligned to how their customers are actually looking. So I used keyword research there. I think that's a really important starting point for two reasons. So first of all, understanding the overarching topics, and second, being able to quantify it to stakeholders. So in terms of, what are the likely outcomes for creating this library? So, if we can say we're going to create 100 pages and the search volume is this amount, and we expect to get, even if it's 1%, and then if you can point to competitors who have a similar library, you've got evidence to say this is a valuable investment. So I use it a lot for that, because some of my clients are thinking, is it worth investing into this? And then you can build in those, the revenue aspect. So if your conversion rate for the website for similar pieces of content, and some of those pages might not exist, or some do exist, but maybe they convert a certain amount of traffic to revenue, to customers, you can then turn that into a bit of a quite light business model to say, right, we'll create these pages, we're expecting this amount of traffic, this amount of leads. So that's quite helpful at that point. And then you can kind of feed in that content process I was just mentioning. And one thing about the, brand guidelines, that's something I like to put into an LLM for my kind of first, draft of a content outline, because you can pull in things from, your ICP documentation, you can pull in brand guidelines, and you get a bit closer to it. So it tries, I try to bridge the gap between what these, the in-house senior writers have in mind for the brand. So it's closely aligned with their vision, but obviously they still need to put their personal, personal experience in there to really make it stand out. And obviously if you don't have that, then it's not unique content, and it's probably not going to be very successful in terms of standing out against the rest.
Nice. Yeah, I love this way of working because I think you mentioned this earlier as well, how companies thought the easy way of outsourcing content was going to be the future. And now actually this hybrid of having technical help to help set the guidelines, also making sure you can sort of work together with LLMs and use your existing content so that you can make unique content and then tossing it back to your in-house editor, content manager, content head of content to sort of work their magic on it is it sounds like it's the way forward, which is nice. It's great for quality content for the consumers. I love the direction that
Yeah,
it's going, right?
definitely.
It's
I think
awesome.
consumers notice. They notice the quality if it's got first person insights and how well it aligns to their experience as well.
Exactly. And I feel like that was the shift in the SEO space, right? Where at some point we just were fatigued with content of like these, yeah, like keyword stuffing and sort of similar blog post that it was working, but things are not going to work anymore for the LLMs. I would love to talk about your 2026 predictions. You mentioned in your article, everyone should check out, by the way, 5 SEO predictions for the 2026, the year of black box and the return of technical foundations. Even though you mentioned that technical SEO isn't a make or break it, it's still important to keep in mind, right? But
Yeah,
yeah, you mentioned the share of model and that attribution will get hard, yeah, basically harder over the next couple of years. What are the 2 to 3 practical proxies a brand can track today to sort of approximate the share of model?
yeah. I think it's going to be more difficult. I kind of came up with this one when I saw Google's talking about understand the full value of a visit. To me, it kind of justifies we're going to send you less traffic. Yeah, share of model is something I've seen a few different people talk about. And I guess if you kind of put in context of where we've come from, we've talked about, what was SEO like maybe 5, 6 years ago, and people would just create content and they expect to see traffic straight away off the back of those pages. And that's their main measuring, that's how they measure it. And then, yeah, you could measure leads, you could measure revenue back then, but maybe people weren't quite as focused. So I think the most important thing to start with is just having that measurement in place. And that sounds really basic to people who are in digital marketing, but actually, even some of the large clients I deal with maybe don't have a full picture of all of those stages. So that's important.
And the attribution is hard as well now, right? Like things, you don't have as much data to really work with. So what advice do you have for SEOs out there trying
Yeah,
to figure this out in-house and agency? How do you, yeah, figure out the share of model? How do you set these
yeah,
things? What's
yeah,
a good
absolutely.
starting point maybe? Because it's quite it's a huge task. But
Definitely.
how
So yeah, that leads on to that. And yeah, there's a couple of things. So I'm still looking at, impressions in Google, because we know AI overviews, AI modes, impressions and clicks are kind of lumped in together. I think I might have put it in the article, but I just don't expect Google wants to split that out, because I think that's really just showing us like, yes, the clicks are low and they will be low. We also know that ChatGPT doesn't send much traffic. So that's where understanding what an LLM knows about your business is important. A tool called Wake, what AI knows about you. And the reason I use that is for my clients, when they're getting around, between 1 to 5% of their traffic from LLM platforms. So that's incorporating, Gemini, GPT, Anthropic, Perplexity. That's still quite a low amount of traffic. And obviously you've got then Google's search console to kind of cover all of that. So I kind of want to start, what are the fundamentals I need to do? So I use that tool. You can pull reports on specific topics. So I'll use my, the original keyword research. I'll look for those head topics. I set up reports in there, and then you set it up with like benchmarks against 2 competitors. So I want to choose I choose 2 kind of close but slightly aspirational competitors that may be slightly ahead. So I'll speak to my clients and we'll see who do we think is similar, but ever so slightly more advanced than us. And then we can kind of see where are those deficiencies. And what I mean by that is seeing, what does the model know about the site? Is it accurate, first of all? So sometimes you get things back where it's, that doesn't fully make sense. And that might be because we haven't got the right content on the website. So that then, for me has led to other ideas around content. So an example of that is physiotherapy company I work with, and we found, compared to our competitors, the AI models didn't have a view of how we deal with insurance customers. So what I mean by that is that business is really focused on private customers, people paying for their treatment instead of using their insurance policy. So we realized there's a bit of a gap there. And actually, from that, we then designed like a set of pages that we're working on right now to just plug that gap. So if you're with, you've got a Viva policy, these are the steps. This is how you can request us. This is how you need to, if you want to have our amazing care, you can request us because we work with them. And this is how you do it.
Yeah, awesome. Money on the table for your client.
Yeah. And then that's just like, those are 10 pages, but they'll always sit there. And yes, they need to be checked and make sure they're always up to date, because at some point the insurance companies might change the way they operate, or, we might get new partners. But actually that's like quite a quick win, quite an easy thing to do.
Nice. In the Netherlands, where I live, insurance policies update every year, and then the contracts get renewed because by law, everyone does need to have a health insurance. So for a lot of these like wellness practices, health practices, they have all this information ready. But yeah, that might not be the case for other countries. So that's interesting to know. And you mentioned how, I wanted to sort of touch on another insight you shared where you felt like, and I'll quote this because I thought it was well written. So you said the message from the Google team was clear. AI mode and AI overview traffic are part of the open web. So you believe that this means traffic from these modes already fit neatly into existing filters we already have. So web, image, video, news. So essentially you're predicting that Google would not separate AI mode traffic in Search Console. So what should SEOs, and this sort, you've mentioned bits of it, but would love to get more advice. What do you think SEOs should stop waiting for, and what should they build internally instead? What else can they build? And not to sort of expect, that at some point Google would share this, because this is also competitor information for them, right? And also it looks bad, because the proportion of the traffic is not that large. So people, would still have to sort of rely on traditional search. Or I'm curious to hear you share more about this.
Yeah, and that's just building on, I guess, my kind of view. A lot of people are saying, AI mode will be the default mode. And to be honest, right now, I'm not convinced of that. And the reason for that is I think looking at AI overviews is kind of a view of how successful AI mode might be if that was the default. I saw a study quite recently from Ahrefs. So they're saying 21% of all searches from their data had AI overviews. And then there's certain categories that had even less. So like local search, it was 7.9% of results had AI overviews. So my interpretation of that was Google doesn't really think there's value in generating a result with an AI overview for the majority of queries. And, the local search, that's a good example of that, because, if you do a search for like best places to eat in your town, and, you do that in Google search, you could do that in ChatGPT, and then you could do that in AI mode. The one thing, first of all, is the AI ones, when I've tried this, you get hallucinations. So like I did this I wanted to go for breakfast and I wanted to try something new. ChatGPT was saying, okay, this is a really great place. I found out from Google that had shut down like a year ago, so not very helpful. And Gemini also shows different results. They're not always the same. So that shows, there is a different layer of processing that is different to Google search. The other thing there is the traditional interface is just faster, because really for that query, I just want to see a list. I want to see the star ratings because I want to trust actual users. Yeah, the AI mode doesn't add anything. And I think Google's testing that. And, I think we see like changing amounts of AI overviews. So my interpretation, going back to that overall aspect of, is AI mode going to be the default? Probably not, I think, because if it was, I think we should probably be seeing AI overviews as a bit of a precursor. And if they're becoming more and more present, because it's a similar experience to AI mode, and obviously AI mode then allows you to kind of drill down a bit further. So I'm thinking, it's just not suitable for everything. So I can't really work out like all the positioning on the AI modes, because it's very similar to Gemini. And I have seen people sharing anecdotal evidence of Gemini and AI modes giving you the same results. So it's, likely, very likely it's the same thing in the background. So is it just a different window into that? So that's why, and I agree with a lot of other people who talk about how these new kind of AI driven services are just additive to traditional search. They're new ways of searching that kind of sit on top. They don't drive as much traffic, and I think we know that through the studies on ChatGPT and obviously AI mode. So yeah, it's just different things that we need to add to. It doesn't mean SEO is not important. I don't agree with this whole geo versus SEO thing. I think that's nonsense, to be honest. I think it's something that SEOs, if you're doing any kind of online marketing, you need to keep those traditional rankings. That's important. You also need to optimize for AI platforms. And yes, you do slightly different things, but in broad strokes, it's basically similar stuff. You need to be thinking about this holistically, I think.
Yeah, to touch on that, like, did you see the news recently about SERP API being sued by Google because Google doesn't want to sort of sue
Yes.
their competitors directly? So I guess that's further proof that, traditional search does matter, and a lot ChatGPT is really relying, their RAG model at least is relying on SERP API. So I think it's very much in line. I would actually, because you touched on local SEO, I had a question about this because in one of your articles as well, you talked about how it's important for local SEO to sort of bridge the digital and physical divide because, that's how they survive with local SEO. So with event tracking for actions like, directions and brand contract, that's sort of really important factors. I want to know, what events do you consider mandatory for multi-location business? Do you work a lot with local SEO optimization for your clients, and maybe you have advice?
Yeah, my physio client's a good example of that. We have a few different branches. There's a couple of things. So they've rebranded it. It was Google My Business, and now it's Google Business Profile. I can't remember. I still can't get the hang of the new name for it, to be honest. So that's important. One of the things I do there is I put it down as put in a UTM tracking code, so you can see because by default it's direct traffic, and I don't really agree with that. And that's a weird thing because that's been around for like 10 years. I remember doing that when I was agency side last time. I don't really think it counts as direct because it's being surfaced in Google Maps and in map widgets in Google Search. So I set it up through the UTM as organic. I'll set it as a campaign. So I say it's Google Business Profile, if that's what it's called. And then I'll put in the name of the branch as well. So then I can then track it and see that alongside the main organic listings. So I think that's quite important for visibility. There's other things you can track through there, like calls. That's important. I think calls are still quite difficult to track. There's obviously call tracking tools where you can replace the phone number on your website. I think the
How
one
does that
thing,
work?
sorry?
You just sort of replace the phone number with this tool so that
Yeah,
it just
so
logs the
that's
call,
it.
and you
Yeah,
connect it with Google Analytics or something? How does that work?
there's a few platforms that offer it. They'll replace the phone number with a dynamic one. It's used, Google Ads uses a system like this, but you can get third-party ones that will use it everywhere. And the one thing I have hesitations about is you don't always get like a local phone number with those services. You'll get like a generic one. And in some areas, people really care about where the business is, and they'll know their local phone number. They'll know the area code. And if your audience cares about that, then I think you need to have that local phone number to show it's genuine. It's genuinely in like the local neighborhood.
Have you seen that being an issue previously, where there were complaints being sent by using the dynamic number, maybe that upset the user base? Or
Not in the sense of complaints. I think it's a kind of a heuristic. I guess an example for the UK would be businesses near London. So I grew up near London, near North London, and we were kind of on the border of the 020 London phone number and then the regional Hertfordshire number. And businesses kind of want to associate themselves with London, so they want the 020 number, so they'll have to buy like a local number for London and not have the local one, which is a different area code. So that's kind of like associating like where your business is, because that's association of size. If you're in London, even if you're in Enfield, it's associating it with success because London's well known and it's big and
on a
big
big smell,
companies
so it's
based.
all good. Yeah.
And conversely, so I now live more in the countryside in a completely different area, and it's quite regional, and I think people care if it's something regional. People care about buying local, and I think having a phone number that indicates it's local because it's got the local area code, I think people subconsciously will care about that because it's the indicator to say, yes, this is a local business and it is there. It comes down to just understanding the audience, in my opinion. So if you know your customers care about local, and especially if it's something where they need to go and visit, I think it implies good service if they know they can, reach the people, if the people running it are local, if that makes sense. Like, it's
See.
like how people go to an independent coffee shop over Costa, in my
And
opinion.
this is a detail that I think a lot of people might overlook because it's not something I'm really aware of, but there could be customers out there that prioritize this. I was also wondering that this might have an implication if you don't have a local country. I mean, like the local code, that this might have implications to that being seen as a localized business for Google and stuff like that. But it's more actually for the customers. So that's interesting.
Yeah, yeah, I think so.
Any other local SEO tips? But I think these were pretty
Yeah.
good ones.
Well, in terms of visibility reviews, because my understanding is they're the biggest ranking factor, they obviously have a big impact on users as well. So rightfully, it's a big part of the algorithm. One of the pitfalls people need to be aware of is you can't incentivize your customers to leave a review. So you can't say, okay, we'll enter you into a prize draw, or even I've had this before from my dentist. They're like, we'll give you £5 if you leave us a review, and that's against the guidelines. Luckily, they stopped doing that for their sake. But what you can do is you can incentivize your staff, the customer-facing staff. They can say to customers, if you mention me, obviously, they have to have quite a fairly good relationship, I think. But if you mention the service you've had with me, then, they could get incentivized by the business. So they might be given a voucher. Then they might say, we get a bit of a reward. And then you kind of obviously it needs to be done in a tactful way. It needs to be done in a way that kind of builds on the relationship that the person providing the service has had with the customer, whether that's over one session, if it's okay, changing the tires on my car, or it could be like the physio client, for example. You might be being treated for 6 weeks, 6 months, depending on what it is. So tapping into that. So you can incentivize people in the team to do
Not
it because
explicitly, not like out in the public. Do it through your staff. Do it through your
yeah,
people.
exactly. So it has to be, within the business. There's no reason why it can't be a KPI for your team. But yeah, you can't be going to customers and saying, right, we'll give you a prize, or we'll enter you into a draw if you leave a review. Some places I've noticed, and some industries don't necessarily follow the rules. So I've been on holiday and, they bring around shots after your meal. Like, do you want a digestive after your meal if you write a review? So I don't know if there'll be some sort of crackdown in cities that do that, because that's what the local companies are competing against. But it is against the guidelines. The downside there is, I guess, if all your competitors are doing it, then is that something you're missing out on? But obviously that's down to the individual businesses to decide how they want to deal with it.
Currently in Malaysia, local businesses here are out and open about incentivizing you for a review. So much so that it's actually, I think, ruined reading reviews in Malaysia because it's super hard to trust it because, most of them are inflated. They're paid, they're being paid a
Yeah.
bot. So yeah, it kind
Yeah.
of ruins the experience. So I think there might be a crackdown at some point, or there would be alternatives, maybe unbiased alternatives, because people know at some point they can't trust these Google reviews. So
Yeah,
that's it.
definitely. And I've seen that going on holidays a few different places. And you notice that some places have different standards.
Yeah,
So where I went, they had all the restaurants were 4.7, 4.8. Thinking, wow,
exactly.
the food
Yes.
must be incredible. But then it's a cultural thing as well, because I've heard, and I don't know if this is true, if it's Japan specifically, but I think possibly they're a bit harsher. And actually, a 4 is a 5. And actually, if it was 3.8, that's actually really good. Whereas in other places, that's you'd be questioning, is it a good place or not? So there's a
Very much
cultural
so.
differences as well to bear in mind. But that's why knowing that local market is so important.
Definitely. I would love to, before we go into our rapid fire round, I have one technical SEO question for you because you have a strong take that the GPT-bot and other AI crawlers can't actually crawl JavaScript the way a Google bot can. So what technical patterns are you seeing that quietly sort of makes brands invisible to LLMs? And what advice do you have for technical SEOs out there?
Yeah, it's a JavaScript issue. This is something I remember dealing with for a long time for Googlebot, because Google always said, yeah, we're good at doing JavaScript. the biggest problem at that point in my career was dealing with single page applications, which are, shiny and new in 2015, I think, but Google can crawl it. Google then got better and is pretty good at crawling JavaScript. But yeah, these new bots, GPTBot and a few others as well, they can't crawl it. So my tip there is it's kind of the same as the SEO recommendations I gave in 2015 and for a few years after that, which is you don't need to use JavaScript if it's not essential. Render the page without requiring JavaScript. One of the things you can do is source code of the web page. You can inspect that, you can download it, and then you can see what's in the source code. And when you inspect, you've got developer tools and you can inspect the element of the page. That shows you the page after it's being rendered, so you can compare them. So I've got a tool which people can download. I've found this really good plugin called View Rendered Source for Chrome.
How do you spell it?
It's called View Rendered Source.
View render.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it basically shows the raw HTML, so what you would see in the source code, and then in the middle it shows the rendered HTML, so after the browser's executed it, and then it shows you the differences. It'll highlight what's missing, what's been added, and that's really helpful for like spot checks. So if anyone suspects, they're not visible on ChatGPT, maybe that's the first step. So can they be seen? So you can check that on a few. Screaming Frog's really good as well, because then you can do this sort of stuff at a higher scale. You just crawl with JavaScript enabled, and there's a JavaScript tab. And from there, you can then filter pages where, if the word count has changed because of JavaScript, then that can then feed you into these kind of spot checks and see what's changed exactly. Some cases, sometimes you see, things like the meta title changes when JavaScript's enabled. It might say something completely different. And that can be potentially a problem because you may be misaligning what the page is actually about. Yeah, those are some things I found, and to be honest, it's maybe more with the legacy platforms for clients I've dealt with, where maybe it's more of a problem. I think maybe a lot of platforms are getting a bit better at it, but then again, I've also found I've been working with a client on Shopify, and their platform used a large amount of JavaScript, and it had like pagination, and we couldn't crawl it. We couldn't find it very easily, so that's potentially product pages deeper in the site that couldn't be found, then some blog pages couldn't be found. So that's all stuff that potentially was not visible for ChatGPT. Potential missed opportunity. So that's something that was a priority to fix, because it unlocked, more of that content to be visible. So that's probably an example of, that's one technical thing we could do, but maybe that's all we need to do really. As a starting point, and then invest in content, because actually the content is, the most important thing.
I like that you've maintained this point of view. You're not like technical first, content first. Technical is a supporting character.
Yeah.
And that you mentioned a View Rendered Source. It has a 4.5 rating, guys, since we were on the topic of rating. So do check it out. I'll link it in the description. Awesome. I'd love to move into our rapid fire round. Are you ready?
I am.
There's no timer or whatever, but it's just short answers and the first thing that pops into your mind.
Okay.
With these questions. So the first one, what's the strangest / most interesting thing you've used an LLM for?
Yeah, strangest thing. So I think a lot of people are doing this with image generation, and that's got really good now. I went with my friends to Berlin, and this was when you could get the kind of manga style design, Studio Ghibli. So that was like really popular. So basically someone did like a selfie of the group. Then we took that, and then it's like, right, now we need to make the group even more happy, put more beers on the table, make the beer hall where it was obviously, it's a tourist trap. It wasn't actually Bavarian, but it's the Hofbrauhaus in Berlin. Make it even more grand. So then we got an upgraded picture of us. Then it's like make it even more exciting and more.
So you're pushing it to its limit, basically.
Yeah, just like,
and then the options all grand.
And then gradually the picture will get more and more extreme, and then it's like make it a galactic level of Maaskrugs, more beer, make the beer hall even bigger. So it kind of just escalated. So that's quite fun. So
I
we've done
love
a few of
that.
those. But the weird thing was, we're all in our mid-30s, but it made us look 50. So it's got some sort of age issue with my group of friends.
It
Not really
just knew
sure
how
if I
much
should be
beer you guys
insulted.
were consuming.
It could be.
We used that as the yeah, that's quite funny. I loved how he kept it going as well. I can only imagine the group chat was like constantly pushing the limits. What's your favorite LLM?
Gemini. I did start with ChatGPT, but then I like how Gemini is just integrated into everything I use. I use Google Workspace. I have used Copilot as well. I used to use that because I managed a hockey team. I used to use that for match reports. I gradually switched to Gemini because the quality was better. Gemini integrations. That's the main reason.
What's one SEO task you never want to do manually again? Dare I say
Yeah.
technical SEO? Like I feel like it's going to be a technical SEO task.
Metadata, specifically meta descriptions, because it's boring, it's low impact. Yeah, so that's really easy to automate.
Awesome.
I don't want
What's
to do that ever
one
again.
Fair enough. What's one SEO task you think should be automated in every team by default?
With LLM specifically?
Yeah, it could be like reporting. Yeah, it can be with LLMs, but for example, it could be like reporting, quality assurance, internal linking.
Yeah, so I think one thing I've used LLMs a lot for is, I guess, the kind of behind the scenes business artifact. So writing, project proposal. So I use like Amazon's one pager and 6-pager styles, something I learned from in-house, and I quite like them. I don't really like writing PowerPoints because I don't want to waste time on design. I'd rather just do a document. And what I like about those kind of Amazon's, 1-page and 6-page approach is it's very formulaic. It's, just sections that you fill out. Are you familiar with those?
No, I'm not. So can you actually please share more about it?
Yeah, so it's basically a format that Amazon uses for their internal work. They have like 1-pager, which is it's actually more like 2 pages, and it's basically for like a smallish initiative. And you have like the project goals, the key components, the things you're delivering. And what they do is before a meeting, everyone would sit down, they read through the document in silence, and then they discuss it, and then they might make changes. And then if you're like the project lead, you're obviously then taking the feedback, and then you'd go away and maybe you'd make some amends. And the idea of that is you're focused on, what's the project trying to deliver and getting alignment. And what you can do as well is you can circulate that before the meeting. So one of the things I used to do in-house was share the documentation ahead of time, have people review, comment. So that's why, Google Workspace and other shared platforms is useful because you can comment directly. And then that meeting can be about discussing the comments. So you can then, bring someone in. So, okay, you've commented about this on the project. Could you elaborate more about what that means for your team, what your concern is? Then we can discuss it, and then we can kind of work out what the solution is.
Way more
So,
efficient and
yes.
standardizing
And that's what I like
the
about it,
nice.
because it's very difficult keeping meetings on track sometimes, because I think in general, lots of companies have a culture of lots of meetings. And if you've ever received a meeting invite with no agenda, I think this kind of approach is for you, because it's a way to build structure and bring in, this is what we're going to talk about. It's very clear. Everyone's already in the loop. So that's what I like about it. And yeah, the 6-pager, just the final part of that, that's like for more like bigger initiatives. So if you're planning like, your Q1 or Q2 strategy, so you might have lots of different subsections, and that's a bit longer. So yeah, I like it because I don't really like PowerPoints. I think it's, I don't really want to sit there designing the deck. And actually a lot of content, I think I just prefer written format. But back to the LLM aspect is I can give it a bullet point stream of consciousness of what I want to achieve. I can also, with Gemini at least, you can add in a template. So I have like a Google Doc template of the 1-pager or the 6-pager, and then I can get it to kind of generate my first draft of what that looks like. So it would like pull in all my bullet points and put them into like written content, and then I can go and edit it to make sure, it will hallucinate some stuff that maybe I didn't really want, or it might even just give its own ideas, which sometimes I welcome, sometimes not. So I can edit that. But that's a good use of LLMs in my opinion, because it's not public facing, and actually me sitting there and typing things, kind of, the output is a good use of
Redundant.
time.
So
But yeah,
automating this, it sounds like and this sounds like something that all teams can actually do.
I think so.
Is
Yeah.
great. My next question is, and this is something new for the new year, because there's lots of noise on LinkedIn, Blue Sky, well, mostly LinkedIn, to be honest, about, everyone's trying to jump on the AI, GEO, SEO train and share their hot takes or their breaking news or analysis. My question is, what's the fakest SEO news that you've seen recently?
I think the fakest has to be, I saw someone put a chart out showing how in something like 5 or 10 years, ChatGPT will overtake Google for traffic. And they even had Google going down to like zero traffic, zero market share, which when you look at the data they've extrapolated from, it's like, I don't know, like a month. I'm not entirely sure, but it's like nothing. It's when, GPT's market share is like still very small if
And they're
you're incorporating everything.
extrapolating that.
Yeah, it's just like, yeah, because that's like, okay, when I got married, I got married to one person today and I got married to 0 people yesterday. That means tomorrow I'm going to get married to 2 people. And then in a year, I don't know how many people I'll be married to. So that doesn't make sense. So I think, yeah, I don't agree with that. We saw some news with Apple now using Gemini for its model to replace Siri. So yeah, it's like you just don't really write off Google because they've got way more resources than a ChatGPT than the OpenAI. They've got so many more advantages in terms of integrations, that's one of the reasons why I like using Gemini, because it's built in. And ChatGPT integrations is the other way around. It's like pulling things into it. Although to be fair, I'm not using it as much anymore.
Because you've already sold yourself to the Google universe.
Yeah, yeah. So I just can't see ChatGPT replacing Google. I think that's wrong. I think it's something that sits alongside, but yeah, we can't be throwing everything out just focusing on ChatGPT. We need to be looking at all of these platforms. So it's kind of like everywhere. We need to look at search on all platforms.
It's interesting that you brought this up because ChatGPT obviously did it came out with a bang, right? It had a lot of noise. To people that are not in the industry, this was very exciting, and it got into a lot of hands of people that are not familiar with digital marketing or not even in the world of following AI advancements. But for those of us who've kind of kept, who've had to stay in the loop because we work in this space, we knew that sort of when Google came out, they were just sort of like refining, and like they would still have the market share because they own the most data. But yeah, so it's very interesting to see. It's almost comical to see this information on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up. A favorite tool you didn't expect to love?
So I've just recently, I wanted to pick up a new project management tool, and I've always been in 2 minds about what I use for managing projects. I found an open source one called Vikunja. So it's spelled Vikunja, and I think it might just be made by a solo 1-person team. But I was actually really surprised. A couple of things. So it's very fully featured. It's got like a lot of stuff that I've used, like Asana, a table, work. It's basically got exactly everything that they have, minus maybe 5% of features, and it's really cheap. So it's like you can self-host it for free, or you can just pay hosting. It's like €4. So I was really surprised at the stuff you can get for from open source platforms. So I looked at a few different open source ones. This is also like half the price, maybe even per user, maybe less, maybe even like 30% the price of these kind of big companies, which, for most people, you don't really need it. You don't need all the bells and whistles. You can kind of get away with something that's got 90 to 95% of the functionality. So yeah, that's something I recently implemented. And I kind of feel like if it is a 1-person band, I'm like happy to support another 1-man band. That's great. And I guess also, independent companies, I think that's something, even if it's digital, because people think digital is like really big companies. There's a lot of small bootstrap companies that exist. And yeah, I think it's kind of cool to support those because actually they can kind of either innovate or they can save you money.
Yeah.
So yeah. So
this is sort of the equivalent, the online equivalent of supporting local or supporting, small small businesses. So that's really nice that you started that out. I love the fact that it's open source as well. The next question, I have 2 more. After this one, in 6 months from now, what AI capability will change SEO significantly?
That's a good question. I'd like to see more about revealing the black box a bit more. And I know we already spoke about my prediction is maybe that black box doesn't get opened up because I don't think Google will show that data. I would like to see if there's more. So whether that's from Google directly, whether it's something like ChatGPT dashboard for publishers. And the reason why I'd like to see that is, going back to this open web topic, everyone's part of the ecosystem. These publishers need to have, the LLM platforms need to have publishers supplying quality information. And I think we're probably already seeing this with LLMs now kind of ingesting LLM's own content. So example being like Stack Overflow, number of questions kind of collapsing. And therefore, for the overall web, you've got like loads of AI content that's now being ingested. So content quality could go down. At some point, they need to kind of keep that cycle going of publishers feeding in quality content. So yeah, I'd kind of like to see some sort of dashboard for smaller publishers, not just the big companies that they have licensing agreements with. So there's some sort of incentive. And yeah, I think that would obviously change the way we do SEO because we will have a bit more measurement for that.
Yeah, this also, when we were at the SEM Rush conference, it was quite interesting to hear The Economist sort of, I don't know if you were there during the talk from the head of SEO, I think, or traffic of The Economist, and she was sat alongside someone from Financial Times, and they have a contract with ChatGPT as a publisher, but Economists were still sort of like, holding their cards close and being like, we're not ready to do this. So it's interesting to see how things would change as these companies have to sort of like, I feel like the LLMs now have to bargain with them a bit more, especially ChatGPT now that, Google's back in the race or sort of leading the race again.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that switches out. If AI vanished tomorrow, sorry, more grammatically correct, or turned too costly, which part of your workflow breaks first?
Probably those kind of business documents I talked about, because they are a good time saver. And so that would break. That would mean I'd have to spend more time producing those things, which, yes, they're important in setting direction, but they're kind of the preparation work. So that's a little bit problematic. I guess I'd then have to just go back to, with everything else, just doing SEO like I did in the past. I hope not, though, because I think I found quite a few uses for it. The other thing that breaks is I used the first thing I did with ChatGPT when I first got my subscription, I think it was like 2022, is learning Python. And I spent years and years trying to do that. Didn't really get anywhere. And suddenly I could use it to create me stuff. And back then I had to do a lot of learning and fixing because it wasn't very good. So that breaks. I'll lose all my Python abilities, like the little Python ability that I have.
But do you have the programs in as well, like pandas and stuff like that to help you with Python on ChatGPT, or are you just sort of using the language model as is?
No, so I let's say I have an idea for something. So the first thing I did was like just a really simple spreadsheet where I wanted to combine lots of CSVs together. So I kind of got like ChatGPT. I told it what I wanted, and then I'd get it to write the script for me. But then I put it into Colab. So I run it through that, and I had like Jupyter notebooks as well. So everything I do is now in Colab. So everything's running, and it means like it's kind of standalone. So I'm just using LLMs to write the code, and yeah, I'll do the troubleshooting. I'm kind of like coaching a junior developer on what I want, basically. And then if I really get stuck, I'll speak to my wife because she knows how to do it. So,
really?
Yeah.
But if not, now you're sort of like, you have your people in line.
Yeah, pretty much.
Nice. Last question, one word to describe the future of SEO.
Exciting. And I was thinking nervous because there's a lot of change. But the reason why I say exciting is I caught up with someone I used to work with, and he kind of described it as like, dealing like a fresh deck of cards. Sometimes, in the previous round, you might have a bad hand or a good hand. In the next game, the deck's reshuffled, you're starting again. And I felt like that was a good... Yeah, level playing field again. Yeah. And there will be winners and losers, but kind of starting again. And I think that's actually quite an optimistic way of thinking about it. So rather than just be worried about change, it's a chance to kind of learn the new rules of the game, and also, I guess, think about what are some of the strengths you have from maybe in some areas, starting with, different rules. So what can you learn about AI search to enrich your existing SEO strategy? And also think about how you're not at a disadvantage because everyone's starting from this level now. Yeah, you're kind of, starting afresh in some areas.
Beautifully said. We'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for your time, Seb. Please let the people know where they can learn more from you, how they can potentially work with you. I know you also have some speaking engagements in 2026. So where can people find you in real life? Yeah, let the people know.
Yeah, so probably I'm most active on LinkedIn. You can find me at Seb Atkinson, linkedin.com/in/Seb Atkinson. Got my website, atkinsonsmithdigital.com. Yeah, I mainly work with B2B clients and across like technical SEO, content strategy. I've got specialism in international as well. So I deal with all sorts of challenges there. And yeah, next event I'm at, I'm not speaking, but I will be attending the Search London 15-year birthday party. So I'm excited to meet lots of other SEOs then. That's in February. And yeah, I'm hoping to do a little bit more public speaking because to be honest, I haven't really done that much for a while. I did my first one a while ago at Search Norwich, which was, I think, 2 years ago, maybe more.
Really?
But I had a break for like 5 years of not doing anything and I'd like to get back out there again. Yeah, that's my goal this year.
Yeah, hit him up for more gigs. We'd love to see you on stage. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time, Seb.